I don't think I felt as nervous since I did Frank O'Connor. You remember the story that they used to have in First Confessions, and I was the priest in primary school, and I think I was actually as nervous then as I am now speaking to you all. But I guess, first of all, I should say hello Newcastle West. Hello Limerick. I think you've probably got the idea that I want to talk about tonight, which is that I'm actually going to ask you all to trust me to become your directly elected mayor. The most important thing about that was when we stated that we weren't going to go with any party, we were actually going to go independent. And I'll come back to that later. But I tried to think about a way that you could all remember the skill sets that I think I bring to the mayor, and I have actually gone back to the words P-A-R-T-I. And it's not that I can't spell, I just need to use that I. Essentially, for me, if we want to pick the right mayor in what's the first time ever that any place in Ireland, in the history of the state, will actually pick their mayor themselves, I think we need to have a mayor who's passionate about where they're from. I think we need to have somebody who has an ambitious and a realistic vision at the same time of what that place can become. And lots of candidates are going to say that they have both of those. But for me, it's important that you can have a vision, but you actually know how to get the job done as well. And that means that we need to have, which I hope I have, the right skills to actually do that and the right track record, and most importantly, a mayor who's actually independent. Now, before we get into some of what I want to say about where Limerick could go, I suppose there's just so many people I want to thank, and I'll go through this really quickly if I can. But I suppose, firstly, I have to thank Calum and Maria and the four of my friends who embarrassed me all hell while I was sitting down there about saying all those things about me and such generous words. I want to thank all of you who actually came here tonight, because I know you've other things to do, and actually it really means a lot to us when you actually turn up at events like this. I want to thank those who've already, I know, tuned in to listen to us tonight, who couldn't be here tonight. And I want to thank those who have actually made the effort to support our campaign already in many different ways. During the course of the night here, I was actually blown away by the number of different places that I was meeting people from. I suppose we made an important decision about the campaign, which was to actually not do it in the middle of the city centre, like so many other candidates, but to do it right here in West Limerick. That was a bit of a drag, I know, for some people that got caught in the crash coming through Adair and things like that and had to wait. And I suppose we're going to have to sort out that road in Adair, Mary, at some stage. Mary's already giving away my best lines here, I can see. But I also got to talk tonight to some people that I met just briefly in the past who haven't even been born here in Limerick. And we want to make sure that they all realise that Limerick is about them just as much as it is about the rest of us. You've heard that I wasn't born in Limerick, so that's a kind of a funny story that in some ways we might be voting for the first immigrant mayor tonight of an Irish city as well. I want to thank our now ever-expanding group of volunteers. We've had an event organising committee that I think you'll agree have done a super job. And particularly I want to thank my cousins who jumped in and abandoned the running of the Red Cow to be here tonight with us here. I want to thank Damien, he's all hanging over there, as usual, hanging out in the background. I guess I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for him. He wants me up in Donegal, so you're going to have to talk to him about this sometime between now and June, right? But I told him I'm staying for 5 years at least if we can make this work. Calum, who was here tonight, has not just been our MC, he's been basically the centre of our campaign up to now, and I want to thank him and all the other volunteers who have done their daily work, because without them you just don't have a campaign and people don't hear. I know Mario can't be here tonight, who runs the hotel here and was so kind to offer the room to us. I want to thank him and his staff, our AV team, and all the other volunteers. A little word from my brother Adrian, wherever he is, who we had to time this for his arrival from America. He normally gets the pick when he comes, and we have to organise the parties around him. So we're organising this party for you, Adrian, tonight. To Mum, to Brendan, to Siobhan, I spot Jack. Oh, there he is. He's just after coming in the front. He's our Arsenal fan in the family. oh, no, sorry, Ryan, I mean, and Rebecca, who's, I think, out with the magician. And I guess my Red Setter Army has to get a thank you. You couldn't believe the guilt trip we were put on as we left the house tonight when we had to try and explain to him that he wasn't getting a doggy pass to come to this party. So we've got a lot of work to do in Limerick to make the place a lot more dog friendly. Can I just ask you guys to give them all a round of applause? When it came to actually choosing a location for the launch, there was no option for me. It had to be, not just in West Limerick, but in this room. Now there's a guy down there, Dinny O'D at the back, who I know has skipped cards tonight, so that's really important for Dinny when he does that. But you can't talk to him about this room. Well, it's sort of changed a little bit since, because this used to be the first nightclub that we were ever allowed to go to. Mum, as you might know, is from Brosna, and for all the city people, that's East Kerry, right? So that's just across the border. Dad is from here in Arte up the road, and they pretty much reckoned that we could come by bus to here, because we'd be safer here, we'd get up to less trouble if we were coming to West Limerick, rather than hanging out with all my mates from Sexton Street, the Christian Brothers in town, in the nightclub. So, Dinny, it was much better behaved back here, and we didn't get into any trouble, so no telling tales later. But the links actually also go a lot deeper for me with this part of Limerick. I'm going to publish this speech so you can get to read the full story about this. But when we moved back from Birmingham first, my dad was one of those guys who was very practical about certain things and looked at the potential in other stuff and was less practical about that. Mum was telling us this at Mother's Day recently. We were having lunch with herself with Damien. And she was reminding us of when we moved back from Birmingham. Dad was back home on his own. I knew she'd kill me when I started telling this story, right? Dad got sent back to sort out where we were going to live back in Limerick. And he was looking at good land, potential, all that kind of stuff. It was, I know it's going to be hard for some of the younger people in the audience to believe this, but it was a Limerick and a world where there were no mobile phones, no fax machines, there was no way of actually sending photographs. The phones, you pressed buttons and things like that on them to actually get calls. So he didn't really tell her very much. He arrived back to Birmingham, I guess I was 4, Adrian was 2 at the time, to tell her that we were all moving back to Patrick's Well, to Red House Hill. Mum asked him just the obvious question, like what was the house like? And then he admitted, as any builder would, because he knew he could fix the problems, that he had never gone inside the house to check. So a couple of months later, Mum's coming back with her 4-year-old or 2-year-old to find out that the house doesn't have any running water yet, and it still needs to be fixed up. Now, I think I would probably have been looking tonight to be Mayor of Birmingham and not of Limerick if it hadn't been for my uncle and my grandfather in Arte, who kind of took us in for a couple of months, right beside this great family here in the front. And so I got to spend a good bit of my summers, a good bit of my childhood, right up the street here in Arte. And so, for me, that was a really important formative part of my life. I guess I got to hang out with, like most kids should have, those childhood memories of summers with your granddad, with your uncle, just doing things like, the nice stuff, right? Going back to the creamery, but also learning how to foot turf and the Cunnakeens and wine hay with Tom, who was always bigger than St. John's or wherever he is. All of these little memories that are so brilliant. And in some ways, that's for me what Limerick is about. It's about all those kind of memories. So my last thank you, which I want a big cheer of applause for, is just for Limerick. The funny thing about Limerick for me is that I grew up in Limerick, as did many of you, in the 1970s and the 80s, when it was a really difficult place to live. It doesn't seem like that long ago in one way, but it also seems like a world apart. But at the same time, it was a Limerick full of lots of fun memories, of friends, of school activities. It was also a Limerick that taught us the power of education. The ability to use education for people to get opportunities, the importance of hard work, of integrity, but most of all, kindness to others. I've now lived numerous years, as you heard earlier, away from Limerick, but 10 years ago I knew I just had to come back, because this was home. And I'm really delighted to do that, because this is a space in the world for me where I owe it so much and I want to give so much back to it. But tonight, for me, and you got a hint of it earlier in some of the lovely comments, it's actually not really about talking about the past, it's talking about the future. We've got this historic election coming up, and I want to talk a little bit about my dreams and my ambition for Limerick. Because Limerick is one of those places, I mean, it just draws you in. It doesn't want to let you go. And it's not perfect, because none of us are. But deep down we know we love it, right? And there's a bit of a sense, I always think, with Limerick, of being the underdog. Things always seem a little bit harder here than in other places. I've talked to people, and there's a bit of a fear going around that the glory days of Limerick, which led the world when we built our Georgian houses, led the world again when we built Ardna Crusher and Shannon Airport, that they will never be repeated. But I have to admit, when I look at Limerick today with all of its strengths, I have to ask, why not? Surely we can do better. Surely we deserve to do better. These economic hits that we all know about as we climbed out of poverty of the early years of our state kept knocking back Limerick, but we kept going. Now, our Limerick is much, much better now, thanks to great leaders. I think you'll know some of these names. Brendan O'Regan, Donald O'Malley in the education, even his nephew Des, Jim Kemmy, West Limerick's own James Collins and Michael Noonan, Ed Walsh of UL, a visionary to give us a university, John O'Sullivan, and of course Willie O'Dea and others. But we've now got new leaders, and I'm loath to list names, but I know you'd all agree with me listing the name that's already been mentioned, John Kiley and JP McManus. But for me, Limerick is much more about the largely unsung heroes. People like Linda Ledger, who feeds thousands of people from St. Munchin's Community Centre in the city centre. Mick and Valerie Dolan, who do amazing things down in the Dock Road. Our own Miriam O'Connor, who's recently retired president of Limerick Chamber, and Barry O'Sullivan, the chair of the Shannon Task Force, who has mapped out a path for this region that's just an amazing vision. But I also want to give credit to the teachers who in our schools every day prepare the next generation of leaders for Limerick, our frontline workers, and all the others who inspire us daily, including one of my big favourites, Denise Trailer herself. And when I think about all these names, I understand that there's one thing that unites them all. They want a higher ambition and more for Limerick. And most importantly, they also ask why not. Years of listening to people tell us that we were not as good as the others has had to take a toll on Limerick. It knocks our natural confidence, it removes hope, it grinds away at our ambition. But in a sort of a funny way, that adversity has brought this community much, much closer together. It's built a resilience in Limerick, it's built togetherness. And that is a future that we can build on, because that is our Limerick. Now, that's a hugely valuable place to start, but it's not enough. I know we're missing something else. And there's something that people say to me all the time in Limerick that I have to admit frustrates me no end. People say to you, well, I know it's not world class, but sure, isn't it better than we had? And I say that's enough. We have to stop thinking that we don't deserve world class. We have to ask why not. And let's be clear about one thing. When I talk about Limerick, and when I think about Limerick, I will never apologise for wanting more for Limerick. Look around. We do need more for Limerick, as Cathal has pointed out. We can't let this complacency that I think we've slipped into actually settle into the way we think about our own place. This is the first generation of young adults who are not expecting life to be better than it was for their parents. And I tell you, if I get this mayor thing, I will work day and night to find a way that that reverses back here in Limerick. Because one of the things that has happened in the past for me is I've experienced times that were really bad, and not actually that long ago. When I was at the Department of Finance, things were really bad, and I mean really bad, and I don't think a lot of people understood how bad they were. We were at the point in the Department of Finance, around the time of the bailout, of thinking about asking FDI companies to pay their taxes of a couple of years early so that we could actually pay nurses. so we could pay social welfare because nobody would give us any money. We couldn't borrow money anywhere to pay those things. And you can guess when I turned up at the Department of Finance how the morale of my team was and how low it was. They had battled and battled to keep the country out of a bailout and actually failed. So it's kind of funny, you get a job like that and you imagine the first thing you've got to do is sit down and actually deliver loads of new policy documents and briefings for the minister or whatever, but actually it wasn't. I had to deal with the HR issue of a morale of a team that was on the floor, and how could I actually get that back so that they could see a future that was actually much better, and then they could imagine where they had to go to work. Now, I did hear a couple of people say I think somewhat differently about different things from time to time. So there was a bit of a shock in the Department of Finance about the solution. Because I rang somebody I knew, a guy called Ian Robertson. I don't know if you know Ian, but he's the co-director of the Global Brain Health Institute at Trinity College. And with his help and his conversations, we actually lifted the spirit of the team. Now, I don't know how many times in that time I met people who didn't believe me when I said we were going to get out of the bailout. That first time round without an extension. 2 years later, 3 years later, that team's confidence had lifted to the point that that's what they did. And history has recorded their success. Now, I want to just read one little thing with Ian that I've often used again, and I think it's very relevant to Limerick. Suppose we were to discover something that could make us wealthier, healthier, longer living, smarter, kinder, happier, more motivated, and more innovative. What is that elixir? Confidence. If you have it, it can empower you to reach heights you never thought were possible. But if you don't, it can have a devastating effect on your prospects, despite your objective achievements. That can apply just as easily to the whole of Limerick as it can apply to some of the communities I've been visiting in the last couple of weeks as I walk around some of our city areas. But on the flip side, our sports teams, Munster and our hurlers and others, have shown us that they can be world beaters when they believe in ourselves. And what I want you to do today, I want Limerick and every Limerick community to be looking to a future with more confidence and actually believing that they also can be world beaters, the best place to live in Europe. Now that's a kind of a nice title to have for our Limerick. And there's no doubt we can do it if we banish doubt and we have enough confidence in ourselves. And if anybody you meet after you step out of this room tells you it's not possible, just ask them, why not? I often wonder, because I've travelled a number of different places, like would I still see things as optimistically about Limerick if I actually hadn't left Limerick? And now I'm back. Perhaps it's by living away that you learn to stand up for Limerick, like friends stand up against bullies in a school. Perhaps it's by living away that you actually get a much deeper understanding of the privilege it is to actually live in a place like Limerick. Perhaps it's by living away that you can actually see much more clearly the unrealised potential of a place like Limerick. I've been back now for almost 10 years. Needless to say, I've been examining Limerick very closely. That's what happens when you walk around the streets and you see actually what Limerick looks like. I saw a network of railway trains, or lines, going all the way from Kilmallock to Myross to Doradoyle to Partickswell and out here to Adair, with no trains, no stations. And I said, why not? At the Hunt Museum, where I was board chair, our garden wasn't open to the public. And I said, why not? I looked at an empty building at the corner of Catherine Street, which was then not full of 500 workers from Uber. And again, I asked, why not? I looked at 60 hectares of unused land at Colbert Station that I used to cross when I was going to school, going to the fields from Sexton Street. And they weren't full of amenities and houses. And again, we asked why not. People told me that Georgian buildings couldn't be renovated to become historic homes. And what did I ask? Why not? And then I saw a local authority in Limerick that didn't have its own development company, didn't have loans from the European Investment Bank, which was giving loans to cities all over Europe that we were approving every month. And I asked why not. And it was referred to earlier about COVID. When COVID hit and everybody was scared and people said they didn't know how to help our small businesses and isolate people that were cocooning, I asked why not. And together with a bunch of people in this room, including, I'm going to shame him a little bit, Joe Brooks, who came to be about this and asked to help, we got together Lean On Me, which raised €100,000 for little businesses across Limerick. We got the COVID helpline, the first in the country, established with the GAA and the local authority. And through the Sesame Recovery, and thanks to my old colleagues at the Central Bank, we got billions of euros distributed to help the small businesses across Ireland. Now, ideas like that, they probably seem a little crazy to people when they come out, because they're all new. And when you've got new ideas, a lot of people are scared and they don't want to do it and they say they can't be done. But everything on that list has either been done or is well started, which shows that we can change Limerick. And when we make these changes, they impact on individual lives. Like, I still smile when I go down past the Hunt Museum and see kids and others playing chess in a garden that was closed to the public. And when we were doing it, I go, because Angel Dust, I'm going to give them a plug because they surely have really good pastries in town. When we go buying pastries there on a Saturday morning after the milk market, which is another great thing to do in Limerick, we see the others sitting out for coffee in Catherine Street, Little Catherine Street, beside the building full of Uber workers. And you have to wonder, would that be there if we hadn't asked why not, when that building was empty? I want you, when you leave this room, to start asking for Limerick, why not? Go and ask other people, why not? You have to also ask them to vote for me, of course. I even have to remember that, right? But importantly, if more of us took no more excuses, and I know I'm an independent, so I will say it, from our previously elected representatives, we can't take these excuses. And the excuse we hear a lot of the time is that there is no money. Well, I kind of know a little bit about that subject along the way. The prize that we have from the Troika bailout, which was and involved the most difficult decisions I think ever taken in central government, which cost us about 30 billion of a bailout, and we've talked about that a lot since. But the dividend to that bailout is 30 billion more every year that the government gets to spend. Household incomes have been going up. Government spending is going up. And that seems like it's great. But when you stop and think, you realise it's not. Across Ireland, across Limerick, across villages with people I talk, our quality of life, our sense of safety as we walk our streets, our faith that we will be looked after in our local hospital, and our hope that someday our kids might actually move out and find their old place. None of that is working. People are worried about these things, and the dots are not connecting. Now you know the question, right? Why not? And I think one of the reasons is because of this division between how we treat local areas like Limerick and decisions in Dublin. The national government have now got 30 billion more to spend every year than 10 years ago when I was in the Department of Finance. And in their generosity, they have given Limerick Local Authority 41 million of that 30 billion for them to spend on services locally with decisions made locally. And that's why I believe in this DEM. That's why that will help to change that. Because we all know how Limerick is a great place. I don't need to tell you that, but as we've heard and as we know in our heart, it can actually be so much better. And in some way, we're seen as this vibrant home for many of the world's leading companies. We now have 2 universities. At my time, we didn't have any. We have the Young Scientist of the Year, and we are the permanent home to the McCarthy Cup these days. But despite all of that, despite a very successful Ireland, if we really think about it honestly, Limerick is struggling to keep up with other European cities and even with other cities and regions in Ireland. I'll give you just a couple of stats. People that work in the Department of Finance always like stats and evidence, as you probably know. Our population growth in this county grows at 5% in the last numbers. That's 3% less than the national average. Meath is growing at 13%. Limerick contains still some of the nation's worst unemployment black spots, and communities are still being left behind. People I meet daily, as I said, are afraid to walk our streets. The centre of our villages and towns, and especially our city centre, show ongoing signs of dereliction. And most shockingly to me, when I looked at these numbers, we are only building 400 homes every year in Limerick, and Limerick Chamber think we need about 2,000. It should come as no surprise that what we are seeing is a progression whereby rents and house prices have soared beyond the reach of all but the richest in our society. Now that seems like a lot of change and a lot of things that we have to do, but change can actually happen really quickly if you put your mind to it and you just drive on. And it happens in the Irish public sector too. When we were in government, the Action Plan for Jobs was trying to come up to deal with an action plan to create 100,000 jobs, which seemed like a lot. And some people were objecting to the target, the mere existence of a target. And I objected to the target because it was too low. 100,000 jobs in 5 years meant that 2/3 of the unemployed were going to have to wait 5 years to have any hope of a job. That wasn't the right target, but it seemed like one that was achievable. We privately, amongst ourselves, decided to strive for more, and look what happened. Employment went from 1.8 million to 2.7 million in those 12 years. So compared to the target of 2 million that was supposed to be an aggressive target, we actually exceeded it by almost 500,000. That means hundreds of thousands of households taken out of poverty and the risk of poverty and having confidence in the future again. So it all seems like it's very rosy. And then you ask, why am I worried? The reason is that when you look at the numbers in a Limerick context, it's a very far from rosy picture. 600, and we actually, I think most of us probably think we're doing quite well, but we forget to look at what's happening outside. 600,000 jobs have been created up to 2022 in Ireland, and Limerick only got 35,000. Now 35,000 is a lot of jobs, but if you got 10 or 15%, you could be talking about another 50,000 people living in Limerick and working in Limerick. And there is a solution. Ask Barry, wherever he is, he's in the room. It's just up the street, up to Foynes and out a little bit of the water. The offshore industry that is right waiting to happen off our shore could easily produce 50,000 jobs across the estuary, right up in Foynes, and anybody that knows Ardnacrusha and the impact it's had in West Limerick will know how that would transform West Limerick. The real reason, though, for me that that's important is that we, every year, in the same way as I left in the 80s, we are still saying goodbye to thousands of our graduates on Shannon's side. This time we're not saying it to them necessarily to Australia and to Philadelphia, but they're moving up the M7 to Dublin. Their kids, your grandkids, are playing for Kilmacud Crows and not for Newcastle West or Arte. We have to move faster and we have to find a way, because otherwise we are falling behind. And most people, in fact, no, not maybe most, everyone in this room I think is convinced, but a lot of people in the public discourse at the moment are saying that the new role of the mayor will make no difference to all of this. And I completely disagree. I know the way government works, and I know that office can totally transform the way it will work for Limerick. I believe, first of all, it's going to be the magic key to open our confidence in this region as we talk about what Limerick should look like as we go to this election. It will bring us together. It will stop the divisions between the county and the city, between different communities across our city. It can raise our ambition about what Limerick needs to transform. But it needs to do one more thing. It needs to plan for the future, not just over a short-term electoral cycle. It needs to protect us against big disruptive challenges which can become opportunities, like climate change, like population growth, and in Cartech, the technologies of AI, which will transform the way we think and work across the way. And if we think about the office of the mayor, which was described earlier, why am I so confident that it can make a difference? Well, first of all, the mayor will have one of the strongest political mandates in the history of the state. It will speak for all of Limerick, with over 40 or 50,000 votes that will have voted for them. The mayor can connect with the friends and connections that I know you all have across the globe who are just willing to jump in and help us to build our new future. Already on this campaign trail, I've spoken to Limerick representatives in New York, I've spoken to them in London. I sat down with an old colleague of mine, Martin Fraser, who's our ambassador to London and is responsible for the government response to the Ryder Cup, and they're all waiting to help. And in some ways, that's not a surprise, because Irish people never forget where they come from. They always want to help. And the form can take many forms. It may be the Ryder Cup. It could be a loan from the EIB. It could be the investment in our football team that has been done by Ciara McCormack. It could be Andy Lee's passion to drive boxing in our city. Or the 40 organisations that were pulled together, including Stripe, to develop one of the most innovative software programs in UL. But it's not just that. The important power the mayor has is when it comes to money, the mayor has even bigger powers and responsibilities. About 700 million is spent every year through the local authorities here or under their supervision. So if you think about it this way, that means that our mayor was going to have to be trusted to take decisions about a budget of about 5 billion over 5 years. And I've said it to a number of people, this is not the moment where I want Limerick to have a Liz Truss moment. We need to make sure that the people that we put into this election, the councillors that we elect, are actually competent to deal with what should be a major step up in what we have to face. The other thing about this mayor, and again, you probably have to understand how government works, and I'll just sort of explain a little bit, is there is only one person in the state that gets to sit down with every Minister of Government on a regular basis, and that is the Secretary General for the Department of the Taoiseach. It's not the Secretary General for Finance. I used to have to sit outside the room of Cabinet and wait to be called to give advice if necessary. The Mayor of Limerick, and I expect that this may change in the future if more and more mayors come, but we can hold on to what we have, is the only other person in the state that gets to sit down with all of the government ministers at the same time and give out when they hear excuses from the Minister for Justice that you can't have more guards in Limerick, and she says that I haven't got any money. Well, the money man will be just across the hall, in fact just across the table, to be asked why not. The Mayor will also take charge of Limerick 2030, which I think we all know is moving really slowly and needs to move faster. So the Opera Centre, Cleves, the new tourism DAC, all of these will have to be driven by somebody who actually knows. So this is massive, to use a great Limerick expression, right? And if any of the other candidates on your doors try and pretend it's not, don't believe them. Because there is some really important powers here, and we just have to get this right. Now, if you will do me the honour of trusting me as your mayor, you know that I love Limerick as much as anybody else in this room, if not more. I have a pretty clear and realistic vision of where Limerick can go, having worked for 10 years at the Limerick Economic Forum and with the EIB and the LDA. And for all the reasons explained above, and thank you very much for that, rendition of life as John Moran, I believe that I have the right mix of competencies to really make a difference. The most important being, I don't think I'll be frightened when somebody hands me a budget of €1 billion and says you've got to actually make decisions about this to try and find ways to use it better. And there are ways to do it better if you actually think about how financing. We mentioned Jean-Claude Juncker earlier. I mean, he managed to turn a relatively small amount of money in Europe by leveraging it up to do a massive amount of investment using things like the European Investment Bank. And we can do that right here in Limerick. But the most important part of me is I want to be an independent that puts Limerick first. And that means I can work with everybody. And that, I think, is the important thing about this election, because we cannot risk having a stalemate in Limerick in October where a mayor from one party cannot agree with the councillors from another party about the budget, and we end up in a situation where we can't move forward. Now, over the next few weeks, it'll come in our event, so anybody with their diaries, the 18th of April, we're going to be in Patrick's Well in the Cuchulainn, so that's our next big step to explain some more of our policies. We're going to show over the 4 priorities that I have for delivery that we want a more livable Limerick, with more affordable housing and a better quality of life. A more prosperous Limerick, with more jobs for our graduates and others. A more healthy Limerick. And that's just our healthcare. That's better use of things like sport for all ages. You all have to play to improve physical and mental health. But I have nothing to hide when I do these kind of jobs. So for me, the most important commitment I'll make is to transform the way our local government works in radical ways, to have more transparency, more efficiency, more accountability, and innovative ways to actually finance it. So I'm going to probably guess that the list of priorities that I will have when we explain these priorities will be wider than some of the candidates. It may be wider than all of the candidates, and I'll make no apology for that, because anybody knows that you need 4 wheels to drive a tractor. And if you lose one of those wheels, the tractor doesn't go forward. So you need it all moving at the same time. And as mayor, what I plan to deliver is, when it comes to housing, I want more for Limerick. When it comes to safety on our street, I want more for Limerick. To healthcare, more for Limerick. You're getting the plan, right? To jobs, we need more for Limerick. To public transport, we need more for Limerick. But importantly for me, equal opportunities for all of our communities means more of that for Limerick. Public parks, sporting facilities, other amenities and infrastructure, we need more for Limerick. Now that is going to mean stretching our budgets to the very limit. But I will refuse to accept, as I did when I was in the department, that delays can be delivered, so to speak, without accountability. The accountability for delays in what we have to do will start with me if I am mayor. And I will propose an examination of our progress every quarter, like we did when we were doing the Troika programme, or by using live streamed council meetings, so that everybody can actually see what we actually are discussing behind those closed doors. And most importantly for me, we have to stop delays. We keep hearing deadlines that get missed. And every time we miss a deadline, the suffering and the worries of people continues in the face of rising rents and house prices, hospital waiting lists and closed shops. Effectively, you might understand me when I say we just need to get on with it, right? I will demand more for Limerick, but I will always ask more of Limerick, of myself, of our politicians, and of all of you in the room today as we move forward to create a better Limerick. And it won't happen overnight. So don't expect any magic wands. We're going to be realistic about this, but I will give a commitment that every day I will work to make it a little bit better each day. And progressively we will move forward over 5 years and look back. And it'll be like looking at reeling in the years, where you kind of look back and say, oh my God, did it look like that? And we didn't think it would happen. But people ask why not. So I will be asking to reawaken that same resilience I talked about earlier, the fighting spirit that has brought Limerick through earlier adversity, to turn our energies with renewed confidence to deliver more for Limerick together. Mark my words, if you trust me enough to be your mayor, I reckon history will note April 4 in the Long Court Hotel right here in Newcastle West. Now, my first ask of you, and thank you for that, my first ask is to ask you to spread the word. It's going to be really hard for us to reach everybody in Limerick, given the size of the county, not least the city, right? So everybody can talk to 10 or 15 people along the way. That's the only way that we can actually get the message out and invite people to our other events. We'll try and get around to as many places as possible. But please let them know that change can happen for the better. I want to hear your views, and we have the suggestion box down the back, so please make sure you've told us what you want more of for Limerick. I need to get you all involved to the extent you can, because everybody in this room matters to me. I want to be a mayor for all of the people of Limerick, and that is really important. And I'm going to finish by quoting the song that you just heard at the beginning, that maybe somebody was listening to the words, as Denise would say, come to the 061. And I guess given that I'm in Newcastle West, it's all the other 06s as well. And we'll show you how to get things done and how to have some fun at the same time. Stick around, we're going to have a bit of that fun later. We're going to try something, and I haven't quite met all the musicians yet, but we're going to try and reinforce this message of the county and the city coming together. We have musicians from Limerick City who have never met musicians from Ate, that are going to play for us for an hour or so when we finish, and it's going to prove to us all that together Limerick is better. Gurmila Gahava.